This is what a clock says, right? I just want to make sure I'm in the right room.
Is this the internet?
Yeah,
Instanet.
yeah, Instanet. I thought you were supposed to bring your own computer.
You can, it just said you could, but.
But it's basically just learning.
Yeah.
It's nothing that might use theirs.
And whatever you put on there will be on your computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can plug into your own, so you
Yeah, I'm joking. Right. Oh, computer, yeah.
On that side.
Yeah, thanks. All right, we'll go get started here. If you haven't yet, we want to log right into Instanet. So log into the MLS with your own number and password. Hopefully you are here for Instanet Transactions this morning. My name is Chris Peterson. I work here at the MLS. Log in here. Anybody not able to get logged in? Hopefully it's working for everybody. Good deal. So we're going to talk about transactions today. We're going to create a transaction from a listing. We'll also look at some settings in Instanet here. You'll notice you have three handouts there on your desk. You've got an evaluation that the Real Estate Commission has us give because there's credit for the class. There's also one about creating transactions, and then there's a third one about transaction templates, which we're going to talk about first. Let me get into Instanet here. So anybody not able to get into Instanet? Oh, come on, good deal. Transaction templates, before we get there, what a transaction template is. Transaction templates, you take a group of forms and put them together. So 30 years ago in the paper world, you would have a manila folder full of all the contracts you need for a buyer, another folder for sellers. So transaction templates let you go in and put those forms together. And it makes it a lot easier when you're creating a transaction, which is why we're going to do it. So to create a transaction template, once you're here in Instanet, we want to go here to settings or setup, which is the little gears on the left. So, see. Okay, so go ahead and click on the Paragon product tab right there. Okay. And go ahead and log out. Oh. Yes. And then go ahead and just close Chrome.
Oh, okay.
And then go to the Internet section right there. Okay. And then you log in with your number and password. It should bring up the dashboard so you can go right into Instanet.
Oh, okay. So nice. I just put in my new password. Instanet?
Right, you gotta.
Oh, what do I hit? Yeah.
You'll hit close it.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and then go to Instanet.
Okay.
Go ahead and accept at the bottom since it's okay.
Do something wrong.
When did you join the MLS?
Yesterday.
So it may be that Instanet is not updated with your information. Is that your nurse number?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to validate it with the.
But I logged in earlier. She's holding the password.
Right, that's the MLS. That's not Instanet. Instanet is different.
Oh.
Instanet is separate.
And then go in on somebody else's.
Well, there's not. So yeah, I don't have because it's Internet. I don't have a practice account or anything. I mean,
Oh,
you definitely can watch. You just won't be able to follow along today.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have anything.
Okay, should I go ask Amy about it? Or-
They can verify it's correct, but usually it takes Instanet a day to pull the
Oh,
information. So
okay.
if you joined yesterday, today is the day they would pull the information.
Oh, okay, so.
So that's why it's just not taking it.
I really didn't. None of that.
You can just close it.
Oh, so just listen.
Yeah, there's not a way to do that.
Okay.
It's just, and it's just because you're new agent, that's why.
Okay.
So. Anybody else have any issues getting in? Hopefully not. Yep. All right. So again, we're going to go in here and we're going to look at a transaction template. So here from the front page, when you log in Instanet, over on the left, when it's set up, or this, yeah. And if you didn't know, you can click on the little 3-line horizontal menu up here at the top, and that will bring out the labels. So if you didn't know you could do that, you can do that. So we want to go here to set up the little cogs, and we're going to talk about transaction templates. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to add in some forms to use if we had a buyer, so that when you create a transaction, you can automatically pull those in. So you want to click transaction templates. Now, if you have transaction templates already here that you didn't create, it could mean your broker created them for your office, because brokers can create them, the whole office can see them. To create one yourself, you just click on add up on the right, and Instanet, you're going to see all over the place. The plus always means add. So we're going to click on add. And to create our template, we need the only required thing we need to give it as a name. And so since we're going to work with buyers, I'm going to call mine buyer forms. You can call yours whatever you want. And then because we want to make sure this works with a certain kind of transaction type, and we're going to do a residential sale here in a little bit. So I'm going to choose under type residential sale. And by choosing a type, it automatically adds the forms into transactions that are those types. So if you have a residential template, farm and ranch template, whatever you want to do. So you've got the name of the template in there, type if you want to have it, and then you hit save. So what that does is that creates the template we're going to use. And so now we need to add the forms to it. And you'll notice here, you can still rename it. You can add a description if you want to change that. And then if you scroll down, you'll see where it says forms. And to add forms, you just click on the plus over on the right. And then that's going to bring up the list of folders that have the forms you can use. We want to go to the Idaho Association of Realtors. And then we would select the forms that you would use the buyer. For our purposes today, we definitely want to have an RE21. That's the purchase and sale agreement. And probably an RE14, the buyer rep agreement. But if you were really creating this to use, you would put any form you could potentially use the buyer in here. Because you don't want to have to come back later and find a form that you forgot to put into your template. I mean, again, 30 years ago in the paper world, you wouldn't just put one contract in that middle of the folder. You put any contract you could use with that client in there. But for our purposes today, you at least want to have an RE14, an RE21. You know, in the real world, maybe you put an addendum in there, agency disclosure. And we're creating the template today. In the next week or so, the Idaho Realtors are going to release updated version of their forms. You would have to come here and replace those. And I had someone say, well, why doesn't it just replace it for you? Well, technically, the way it does, the reason it doesn't is the forms have different names. If you have a document on your desktop called My Document, and then you save another one called My Documents, those are two different names. They won't replace each other. And since the Idaho Realtors forms will have a new name, I mean, they'll have 2018 in the year, they can't replace the ones that say 2017. That's the easiest way to, that's why it doesn't work. So just remember, if you're going to use, if you've created a template or your broker created a template, that when those new forms come out, you've got to update it. And Instanet won't create old versions of the forms. So even if you had it in here in your template and you created a new transaction, if the new form has been released, it won't create the old version. It just won't create it because you haven't added it to your template. And then once you have the forms selected, you'll notice the shopping basket has a number in it that indicates how many forms you picked. And then you just click add, and that will add those to our template. And then you'll see them here now under the Word forms, the ones we put in there. And you can change the order by clicking and dragging them. So if it matters to you what order they're in, you can do that. And then once they're on this list and they're in the order you want, they are saved. There's no save or anything you have to click. They are there. So that's our template. And so you can have as many templates as you want, buyer, seller, different property classes. It's just a time saver, so you're not having to hunt and peck every time and find the forms you need. Questions about the transaction template?
So if we need to change the forms after
Yeah.
15th, you just hit update.
Well, so what you would do is you'd come here, just like we did, go to transaction templates, but now you'd click on your template, and under forms, that old RE21 would be gone, and then you just hit add and add the new one, or whatever other form you need to replace. Yep. I mean, I wish it could be easier, but I mean, technically, just like I mentioned, the name change would mean you'd have to have someone actually physically go in and program that this form is going to be replaced with this form. And you know, the Idaho Realtors aren't rich; they can't pay Instanet and Form Simplicity to go in and program that to happen for everybody. So you just have to manually do it. Any other questions about transaction templates? All right, so we can go back here to the little dashboard icon. Looks like a little speedometer on the left there. So this is the dashboard when you log in. Now, real quick, before we go into a transaction, your dashboard and my dashboard may look different. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because your transaction also has a dashboard. So we'll talk about it twice. What the dashboard is where you see everything when you log in. And you can change how this looks. To change it, there is this little lock up on the top right that says, when you put your mouse on it, it says lock, unlock dashboard. And what that lets you do is add and remove things that are on your dashboard. So I'm actually going to click the lock, and I'm going to take everything off my dashboard. You don't need to do that, but I'm going to take it all off just so I can show you how it works. So when you click on that little lock, you've got blue buttons and green buttons. The blue buttons are actual buttons. Like if I click on create, the little house, that's create a transaction. The green buttons are windows. So like if I click on this one that's a house and drag it down, that would be a window showing me my transactions. And so you can put these things, anything there you want. Like let's say, for example, where's the one I want to use? Here's my recent forms. Here's recent documents. And you can put all those things there. And maybe I also want to have recent signings. And then creating a transaction I put there. Maybe I also want to create a contact. And you can put them wherever you want to, drag them around. Maybe I also want to email documents. And then once you have everything here you want, then you just click the little lock again, and then that keeps it that way. And every time you log in, that's how it will look. So that way you can see the things that you want to see. Just like on your computer, everyone's desktop's different. I don't like having a lot of icons on my desktop. I have a coworker who has like 100 icons on their desktop. So it's all however you want it to be. So with Instanet, with the agent dashboard, you can set that up. There is a default dashboard. Like if you take everything off and close Instanet and open it back up, there's a default dashboard that has some things on it, but you can make it look however you want. So that's the agent dashboard. To create a transaction, we want to click on the house over here on the left. That's where transactions are, the little house. And you can create a transaction from Paragon. You can also create it, of course, from Instanet. Since we're in Instanet, we're going to start there. But if you had been in Paragon, there's a little icon on the listing you can do as well. Your handout shows you both ways to do that. So to create a transaction, like we did earlier, we're going to click on Add up here at the top. And then when you create a transaction from a listing, the name is the address. But since we're not on the listing yet, you can put any name you want in there. The property we're going to do is on a road called Madden, M-A-D-D-E-N. So mine's going to be called Madden. But you can call it whatever you want, test transaction. And then once you have the name in there, we're going to go to our template and choose the template we just created. And then where it says import data under select source, we want to choose Intermountain MLS, not Intermountain MLS partial. The partial would be if you had already created a listing in the MLS as a partial listing and you wanted to pull it in for a transaction. So for example, if you were going to list a property and you had gone into Paragon and entered part of the data, you could pull that information in. That's when that would be used. We're not doing that. We're working with a buyer, so we just want to have it on Intermountain MLS. And then we're going to plug in the MLS number, and I will bring up the MLS number here pretty big so you can see it. It is 98692752. So 98692752. You want to put that in there for the MLS number. And where it says add me as you want to be the selling agent, and you want to leave use wizard checked. Then once you have all that information in there, the name, the template, Intermountain MLS residential, the MLS number, selling agent, and use wizard checked, then you want to click create. And it should create our transaction. And you'll notice as it comes up here, it'll have the MLS number, it has the picture, has the address, brings all that information in. Is that coming up for everybody? Okay, seeing some nods, good deal. Now, before we start talking about the wizard we're on, just to show you the other way to do it, you don't have to go to Paragon because we already have our transaction created. But I'm just going to show you on a listing where it is. So when you're looking at a listing and you have the full detail in front of you, on the top row here, the third from the end is Instanet. So if you click there, it would have populated the MLS number and the address in that little create box. Hit create, and then we would be right here. So you can do it either way. If you're in the MLS, if you're not, and you have the MLS number, you can do it either way. And so we're on the wizard. We're on step 1 of 5. And the way the wizard works is it helps you compile the information to have everything you need in your transaction. Your forms, your contacts, any documents, everything in one place. So the thing that the transaction wizard is not, it's not where you're going to jump in and immediately fill out the forms. If you want to do that, don't do a transaction, fill out a form. But a transaction is putting it all together so that it will populate information. Because the thing with using the MLS is it's going to allow it to populate those forms with the correct address, legal description, your contacts information, all of that stuff can be populated via the transaction. And when it pulls the information in, you still can edit it here so that it's correct on your contracts. Because you can't blame the listing agent if your purchase and sale agreement is filled out wrong. It's like blaming the hammer when the house falls down. It's not the hammer's fault, it's the contractor. So if you need to edit things, you can do that here. So for example, legal description, maybe this is really supposed to be lot 3. I could come here and change it, and then that's what it would put in for the legal description. Another thing to remember with Instanet, and this form simplicity is the same thing, is neither of those programs were created for Idaho. The Idaho realtors are not independently wealthy. They can't pay a programmer to write a program for them. They're using one that's used all over the country, which means there are things here that don't apply to the realtors, the Idaho realtors contracts. Perfect example, lot number and block. I think I taught this class probably 6 or 7 times before someone told me that the lot number and block don't go anywhere on the contracts. And they don't, because legal description is what's used. But you could put lot number and block in there, and it's just not going, and it's not going to go anywhere. And I would love to tell you that I have a list that you can go look at and see what goes and what doesn't, but I don't have that because the forms aren't the MLSs, they're the Idaho realtors. And so the Idaho realtors, they're in charge of the forms. In fact, if I even tried to tell you how to fill out a form or even mention anything about it, they would get mad at me. So we're here about Instanet, not filling out the forms. There's a different class that teaches how to fill out forms, but we're going to see how Instanet works here. So step 1, details, has the property information. And again, you can add and remove things here if you need to. As we scroll down, on the right side, you'll see it says purchase information. If you put the purchase price and earnest money in here, it will populate the purchase and sale agreement with that information later on. You don't have to do that, but you can. I'm going to put it in there just so you can see how it works. If you want to, you can as well. To make it easy, I'm just going to use the list price as the purchase price. So $415,900, let's say $3,000 earnest money. So it will populate that information on our RA21 later on. And then as you scroll down to the bottom, we don't need to click on it, but you'll notice there's a save and exit. If you were in the middle of the wizard, there's 5 steps, but if you weren't completed with all 5 of them, you could hit save and exit to save where you're at. So that's step 1. Questions about step 1? All right, so let's hit next to go to step 2. And those are our dates. So the date that it pulls from the listing is the listing date. We're not the listing agent. That doesn't matter to us. The first date that would matter probably to a selling agent is the offer date. So you can click on that offer date line. Today's date is always in red. It's hard to see it up here, but the 13th, click on it. And then the offer expiration date, let's say it's going to expire tomorrow at 5 p.m. or whatever you want to put in there. You don't have to put a time if you don't want to. And then maybe we want to put a closing date in there. Maybe we want to close on August 13th. And if you want to change the possession date to something else, you can do that as well. So those are the dates. Questions about those? Okay. So then we hit next. And now we're on contacts. And so the first thing to point out here is the information that comes from contacts are from the Idaho realtors and from the listing. So the listing agent, listing broker, those both come from the listing. Your name and your broker come from the Idaho realtors. And the seller also comes from the listing. Now it says seller of record, and the reason it does, you don't have to change your screens, is that on the listing where the owner's name goes, the listing agent put of record. Owner's name is not required, and so sometimes people don't put it in. Sometimes they put of record or CLA or NUNYA, whatever they want to put in there, they can. The thing to remember is whatever they put in there becomes your seller's name in your transaction. So you got to change it. So to find out the seller's name, you can use CRS or RPR. If the tax information, the parcel's been entered correctly, the tax icon will be here. So for this one, we can see the owner's name is Tim Bollinger. That's what we need to change that of record to Tim Bollinger. So to change the seller, you just want to click on of record. And then, of course, the first name is of, last name is record. So first name needs to be Tim, and then the last name, Bollinger. And then where it says legal name, you want to make sure you take that out or you change it to what you just entered, because whatever the legal name says is what it will say on your list of contacts. So sometimes you'll see an agent has put a husband and wife in there as the owner name, and so it'll have the first person's name there, and then the second person's name, last name is the last name. So like it might say Willie and Charity Evans as the last name. So if you wanted to add both sellers, you would have to add them individually because they're individuals. When they sign the documents, they sign on individual lines, so they have to be entered separately here as contacts. So we've got the type already in here as seller. We have our first name and last name. Again, we got rid of the legal name where you put Tim Bollinger in there. The last thing with the seller you can do is there's this address tab at the top, and you can check same as property address if that's the seller's address, and it will populate the form so that when the RA21 is filled out, it has the seller's address on there. So that if you wanted to do that, you could. And then to save the seller, you just click save at the top, And if you got the name right, it won't say of record anymore. It'll say Tim Bollinger. Yeah.
So how, would you go back and add a second contact if it was husband and wife?
Right. If you need to add a second seller, you'd have to go and add a second one. So we're not going to put that for our seller, but yeah, that's what you'd have to do. And buyer works the same way. You're gonna if you have a husband and wife that are buyers. I mean, you just have to think about it logically. Like if they're signing papers that are physically in front of you, they're not both signing on the same line, so they have to sign separately. For Instanet to allow that to happen, they have to be entered separately. So
you just hit add?
right, we're gonna add our buyer here in a second. So
Okay.
yep.
I mean, I was saying add the seller.
Right, but anybody you want to add, you would just come here to click add.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yep. So that's what we're gonna do next, is we're gonna add our buyer. Now the thing with our buyer, because this is a fake transaction in a class, the name of the buyer doesn't matter. You know, Sally Seller, Joe Buyer, whatever you want to put in there. Don't put yourself. That because your name's already on here. It's going to be confusing if your name's on there twice. I mean, that's the truth. Yeah.
My information never came up.
Are you an agent?
Yeah.
Huh.
Let's go back here to the trend. Let's just start again. This. Click on there. Let's click on add. The name in there for us, give the name this time. And template, buyer forms, import, MLS, and then 98692752, and then add me as the selling agent, and hit create. Okay, that's what I was wondering. So yeah, this guy doesn't have right agent in there. It'll won't put your information like it's supposed to. All right. So did you put in the price and the earnest money?
Mhm.
Okay, so you're going to put that back in there. So it's 415.9. Money. And then next date. So your offer date. Expiration date. Oh, you can get it. And then your closing date. And then next. All right, and then let's see what you're there, right? Yep. So go to Up Record and change it to Tim Bollinger. That. And then yeah, and the address, click on address, and say it's property. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So just to explain what happened there, just in case it ever does happen to you, when you're doing that wizard, you just want to make sure you're selecting the correct role you're going to play. Because if it like in hers, for whatever reason, it was defaulting to the listing agent, and so because this is a sale and not a listing, it didn't put her on there. So you just got to make sure you're the right role. And in that instance, we just went back and recreated it. You could always go in here and add yourself as well, but I just wanted to make sure we had everything in there we need. So. All right, so for our buyer, I was mentioning you can use any name you want, but because this is a fake transaction, you have to have your own email address. Because if you're going to practice signing the documents, you need to get the email to sign those. But with a real buyer or seller or whoever, you would put their email address in there. So we're going to add a buyer, and we just, for this morning, just add one buyer. That way you can go through the whole process. Obviously, in a real situation, if you had two buyers, you'd put them both in there. But the thing with putting more than one buyer in, and I'm not telling you if you want to do it, you can do it. But you're going to have to sign things twice before it's finished. That's the whole thing. If you want to see beginning to end, putting one person in is going to be easier. So to add your buyer, you just click on add, and we're going to create a new transaction contact. And then the type you want to make sure is buyer. And then first name, last name can be whatever you want. And then email address, put in your email address. And then just hit save, and that will add that person as a buyer. If you don't want to use them again, uncheck add to address book. If you leave that checked, then you can do other fake transactions with this person. So first name, last name, whatever you want, but the email address needs to be yours. And I am going to add two buyers just so that when we go through the Authentisign, I end up going through it twice. So if you don't see it the first time, you catch it the second time, but you just need to put in one. So first name, last name, email address, and then hit save. I actually have an existing contact I'm going to use. And when you're adding your contacts in here, whatever contact type, so buyer, seller, agent, or whatever they are, the order that you enter them in is the order their names will populate in the forms. So if I've got, in this case, I've got Willie and Charity Evans, I entered Willie first, so his name will populate first, Charity's will be second. If I need Charity to be first, there isn't a way to move her name. I just have to delete Willie and add him after Charity. So just make sure you add them in the order that you need them to be in. And then you should see the name of your buyer you just put in here, and it'll populate their information here in a minute. Questions about adding our buyer or any other contacts to our transaction? All right, so we got our buyer in there. So now we want to hit next up on the top to go to step 4. And because we used a template, you should see the forms that we put in our transaction already here. This is where the template is really useful. Now, we're not going to do anything with our forms yet, but they're already here. If you needed a form that was not in your template, you can still, of course, go here to add, and you could add your forms in that you need. It only adds them to this transaction, though. It doesn't add them to the template. You have to go back and edit the template if you want to do that. And then we want to hit next, and that takes us to step 5, documents. So the difference between forms and documents is forms you edit, documents you cannot edit. They're read-only. But you'll notice on the documents, we've got 2 things in here, the fact spec cover sheet and seller's property disclosure. Is that there for everybody? So that's one big difference between Instanet and Form Simplicity, is that if the listing, and I'm just bringing back the listing here, you don't need to change your screen. When you're looking at a listing, if there's a D here on Paragon for documents, that means the agent uploaded the document. So I intentionally picked one that did. They uploaded the seller's property disclosure. And so when you create a transaction in Instanet, any document they've added to the listing is automatically pulled in, which sometimes may include things you don't need, like a utility printout or the CC&Rs or some other document, but you could always delete those. But this seller's property condition disclosure, you're always going to need that. And so if the agent has uploaded it, that just saves you tons of time, because now you don't have to download it to your computer and upload it. And while that may not sound like a difficult thing to do, before Instanet did this, that was the longest part of this class, because people wouldn't remember where they saved it or how do I save it? Do I right click? Do I click save? What do I do? And imagine you're not in a class, you're not talking to anyone else about it, and you're doing it on your own. It's just as frustrating because now you don't know where you've saved things. So the fact that Instanet pulls that in is a huge time saver. Now, if the agent didn't upload it, you're going to have to get it from them and upload it yourself. But I would say probably at least 50% of listings have documents, and the majority of the time it's the property disclosure. So we already have it here. All right. And again, if you needed to add one, you click add, and then you can upload it here, which we don't need to do. So now we want to click done. And that will take us to our transaction dashboard. Now, we want to pause talking about our transaction here just for a second. If you remember, we talked about the agent dashboard, so now we have the transaction dashboard. Just like the agent dashboard, there is a little lock up here at the top. I can click that. I've got blue buttons. I've got green windows. I can click and drag and put them wherever I want. When you set up your transaction dashboard, every transaction will look that way. So it's not like you have to do it for each one. You do it once, and then all your transactions will look that way. And the same thing applies as the agent one, so I'll just clean mine out and add them again. So let's say I want to be able to email documents or create an Authentisign. So the blue items are buttons, the green ones are windows. So let's say I want to drag down my form, there we go, forms, documents, and then maybe I want my signings to be here at the bottom. And you can change the way they look. I can make this the Authentisign one. I can make it twice as wide if I want. And once you have everything in here you want, you click the lock, and it stays that way every time you're working on a transaction. And when you're looking at the transaction dashboard, down at the bottom of these windows, you've got go to forms, go to documents. Of course, if you clicked one of those forms, it would bring it up. You've got a menu here you can look at as well to get to those things. And then over on the right, if it's not displayed, there's a little horizontal menu at the top, a green menu, brings up to all the parts of the transaction here. So whether you click on forms on the right or go to forms on the little forms window, they both take you to forms. It's just the same way to get to, 2 ways to get to the same place. And that's the first place we want to go. We want to go to our forms. So either on the right or where it says go to forms, you want to click there. And that brings up the forms that we put into our template that are now in our transaction. Are those coming up for everybody? Okay, seeing your nod, that's awesome. Now, the forms automatically auto-populate with our information. So if you click on a form, not the agency disclosure, because that doesn't populate anything, but if you click on like the RE14 or the RE21, that'll come up in the form editor where you could fill out the whole form, but you'll notice that it'll already populate information from our transaction. This is where the time-saving part of transactions comes into play. Because now you'll notice I've got the agent, the buyer in there, and then of course I would come here and fill out the form the way that you're supposed to fill it out. You know, whatever that is, you would fill the rest of it out. You'll notice on the, did anybody not get their information to populate? Okay, it should automatically. Below my buyer's information, there's my purchase price, there's my earnest money, there's my funds due at closing. It does the arithmetic for you. And then you would just fill in all the other information you need to put in there. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the last page, that's all right. You'll notice it's going to have the buyer and seller information that we entered in our transaction. There's my buyers with their information. There's my seller with his information. And then, of course, you would fill out whatever else you need to fill out. When you're working with the forms here in the form editor, and I'm going to tell you right now, because of the way these computer monitors are, you probably, most of you are not seeing the labels. You're just seeing like the folder up there at the top. If you put your mouse on it, it will say file or fonts or whatever. If you go up to file and you come down to the little disk that is save, you have choices that say save and save as PDF. Save saves it in Instanet, save as PDF, downloads it to your computer, and you can't edit it anymore. So you just want to hit save all the time, and it saves it for you. The other thing you can do is if you're done working with this form, you can switch easily to another form in your transaction by clicking on the little house here in the middle that says transaction forms. And you click on transaction forms, and then just click on the name of the form you want to go to. So let's say now I want to go to the RE14, the name of the form, not the circle. And then it saves the one you were working on, and then it opens up the next form. So then you can work on that form instead of having to exit the form editor and come back. That is also a difference between Instanet and Form Simplicities. You can easily go between forms. And then you would fill out this information as you need to. So you just click on transaction forms, the little house, and that brings up the list of forms, and then just click on the one you want to go to. And it saves what you're working on, it opens up the other one. And so then, of course, you would fill the forms out, fill the contracts out like you need to. And when you're looking at an individual form, also under that file menu, while mine's loading here, you've got print, email, or send, would let you email it, all for that one individual form. We're not going to go through that. We're going to talk about how to work with forms together. But if I went to print, of course, it would print this form. If I go to send, I could email or fax this one form. That's what it would let me do. To get out of the form editor, once you're done filling them out, under that file menu again, you just go to exit, and you got to go straight down the menu. If you get off, it'll move on you. And that'll take you out of the form editor and take us back to our list of forms. And so that's how the form editor works. Questions about it at all?
You email a form as a sent PDF?
Yes. Yeah, more or less. It's not like a PDF attachment. They view it more as a PDF web page. But yeah. So let's pretend we filled our forms out. Obviously we haven't, because I can't tell you how to fill them out, but we'll pretend we filled these out. And of course, we're going to use Authentisign here in a little while. But what if you're not going to use Authentisign? What if you need to email these forms to get them to your client? Because they're going to print them out and sign them by hand, or you need to fax them or something else. So in Instanet, their analogy for the real world is the shopping basket. We kind of already saw this a little bit when we created our template. So you would select the forms you want to work with. So let's say the RE14 and the RE21 are the ones I need to email or do something with. When I select those, you'll notice the shopping basket has the number 2 in it, meaning I've selected 2 items to do something with. And then you click on that shopping basket, and then it comes up with this transaction forms menu. And in your handout, there is a really horribly drawn diagram of this menu with a bunch of arrows pointing, trying to tell you what it does. I'm not going to tell you I'm not an artist. I tried to make a little sense, but if you mouse over these icons, it'll tell you what they do. So the first one is delete. Of course, that would delete these 2 documents. The next one is auto-populate. It's supposed to be showing from one source going to multiple locations. Now, we had it auto-populate automatically. That already happens. But the reason you might have to auto-populate again is what if you had to change information on your contact? When you change it on the contact, it's not going to automatically go to the forms, especially if you've saved those forms. So you could go back, edit the information, and then auto-populate it to push the correct new information everywhere. And the reason that's important is that you could definitely go and change it on one form. But if there's 5 different forms that have to have that change, you just need to make sure you remember to do it. Whereas if you do auto-populate, you change it once and it goes everywhere. Just like when we entered the contact initially. So that's what auto-populate is. The next one is fax. That lets you send these forms to a fax number. Now, who has sent a fax in the last month? Okay, no one. One person kind of raised their hand. No one else. Very rarely have people sent faxes. So if you're going to do that, you definitely can do that from Instanet. You just click on the fax machine icon, send via fax. It shows you the forms that you're faxing. You put in their name and their fax number. You can include the fax back cover sheet, which if you remember was one of our documents, and I didn't mention it because I knew I would talk about it now. The fax back cover sheet is a cover sheet they would use when they fax it back to you. So if they're going to use a fax machine to send it back to you, by checking that cover sheet, the fax goes right into Instanet and then your email that they faxed you back. Instead of you getting a fax, having to scan and upload it and put it back in the transaction, it automatically goes back there. And if you enter the fax information here and send it and it's an incorrect number or they don't get it, you're not going to get a bounce back or an error message from Instanet. But you can go in the transaction history and it will show you the number you faxed it to. So that way you can, if it's not correct, you can resend it. But that is faxing. Next to fax is email. Emailing, you'll probably do more than faxing. So to email, you click on that and it lets you enter your recipient information. If the person you're emailing is one of the people in your transaction, you just click on that little contact card. Here come all the people in your transaction. You select the person you're emailing and it puts their information in there. So it makes it really easy to email them. And when you're emailing, you can send as a link or an attachment. I will tell you why attachments are not a good choice. First, attachments have to be downloaded to view. So depending on if they're on their mobile device or their internet's not too quick, depending on how many things you're sending, downloading could take a little bit of time. And if they're not tech savvy, if they go back to that email every time and click on that attachment, all of a sudden now they've downloaded your contract 10 different times. And if you're dealing with different revisions, how do they know which one to click on? So there's attachments are not very user-friendly. Links are a lot easier. They click on the link, it opens up as a web page. If they want to download it, they can, but they are not required to because it's a link. The other thing that a link is useful for is Instanet will send you an email notification telling you that they have clicked on the link you sent them. As a real estate agent, one of the things you're required to do is to distribute information. You don't have to give your client the form and stand in front of them and say, read this. You just have to give it to them. It's up to them to read it. I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty sure that sending it via email counts as distribution if you can show that they opened it. And unless everyone in the world had their login and password to their email, it was only them that could have clicked on that link. So sending as a link is pretty useful. And then the little bonus feature of sending as a link is you can let them edit the forms. Now, in our example with a buyer with a purchase and sale agreement and a buyer rep agreement, you wouldn't do that. But let's say you're the listing agent and you're sending the seller's property condition report, and they need to fill that out themselves because you can't fill it out for them. You check that box, they get it as a link, they can fill the whole thing out on their computer so you don't have to try to decipher their chicken scratch. Now, they're not going to sign it, they're filling it out. And then when you verify it's filled out correctly, then you could send it via Authentisign to sign it. People ask all the time, well, they can't fill it out and sign it at the same time? No, and why would you want them to? What if they filled it out wrong? Now they get to do it again. And that makes you look like a dummy because you didn't make sure they did it right. So by doing the same two-step process that you would probably do in the real world, like, hey, fill this out, but don't sign it, bring it in, and we'll make sure we got everything we need. That's what you would say. This lets them fill it out on their computer. They don't have to send it back to you. As soon as they save it, it's in the transaction. You'll see it. And then when it's correct, say, hey, I just reviewed the form you filled out. I'll send it to you now to sign it electronically. You send it to them, they sign it. But checking this box allows them to edit those forms. And whatever forms you're sending, they can edit them all. So if you only want them to edit one form, only send that one form at that time. Because it's not like I can allow editing of one form but not the other. So that's allow editing of forms. So we have our recipient's name and email address in there. To save it, to send it, just click send. and then it will send it. So just to show you what it looks like, let's get rid of this. They go here to their email, and waiting for emails like waiting for water to boil. Because it's been like 10 seconds, but I'm still feeling like it's been like 5 minutes. So just remember it was 10:43 when I sent it. I always have to look at the clock. There we go. So when at 10:43 I got it. So that wasn't 60 seconds and I still got it. But standing up here in front of you all makes me feel like it's like 5 minutes. So here is the email that I just received, that my buyer received. They click here. There's the 2 documents. They click on one of them. Now you can't, my email doesn't come to this computer. But on my desk right now, I'm getting an email from Instanet telling me that Willie Evans clicked on the, what was it, the RE14 I clicked on first? Yep, the RE14. And then this form comes up and they can review it and look at it. Under file, they can print it, but there's not really anything else they can do with it. So that's letting them view it. And every time they view it, they're going to see it. So that's how those links work. Does that make sense? Links probably the easiest way to do it. And really, obviously, if they're not going to print and sign it and they want to review it, this is the way you review it with them. Send them the link, and then they can review it, and you can look at your copy, and if you need to make changes or whatever, you can edit yours in Instanet. So that's how emailing works, emailing those documents. All right, back here to our transaction forms menu. After email is save as PDF. Whatever forms you've selected will be combined and downloaded as one PDF. So whether you're going to archive it or save it, or you just want to make one print job and print them all at once, that's what it is. Print would let you print them all at once. The difference between the PDF and the print is the PDF is great if you're not at a printer. Maybe you're at Starbucks and your printer's at the office and you're not going to get there until 5 minutes before they arrive. So you save it as a PDF and then just print it when you get to the office. But if you're already connected to a printer, print would print both those documents at the same time. And the reason that's useful is if you're at an office like ours where everyone is networked to one big printer, if you're printing 5 individual documents, 5 individual print jobs, your print jobs could be all intermixed with everybody else's. And that's really fun to do this. That's why I'm doing it. But if you do this print right here, it combines them together and makes it one print job. Same thing as the PDF. So that can be useful. Make it easier to find your forms. Download zip would combine these to a zip file and let you download them. Zip files just means it compresses it to make it smaller. So that's what that would be. You have 2 forms, probably aren't going to do that. If you had 15 forms, that makes more sense. Copy would let me copy these forms to another transaction, but when you copy them, they're not editable forms. They're documents that you can't edit. So when you copy them, just keep in mind you can't make changes. I had someone ask, well, when would I do that? Well, maybe you're making an offer on this house and the offer fell through, but they're making an offer tomorrow. I mean, not that the buyer rep agreement isn't hard to fill out, but you could take the buyer rep agreement, copy it from one transaction to another and not have to fill it out again. So just that's how that could work. And then Authentisign would let us sign these two in Authentisign, which we'll look at Authentisign a little bit later as well. So that's the transaction forms menu. Again, you select the forms you're working on, click the shopping basket, and then those options come up. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's forms. We'll come back and talk about those a little bit more when we get to Authentisign. Over on the right side on our transaction menu here, the next thing to talk about is documents. So again, documents are read-only. You can't edit them, where forms we can edit. And the form the document that it pulled in from our listing is the seller's property condition. So I just click there, and then it comes up so I can view it. Now there are some icons here across the top of the menu. First one here is request review. What request review is for is if your broker is using Instanet to manage transactions. And so request review would send a message to the broker to review this document or this document that's been uploaded. So if your broker is using some other tool like SkySlope or whatever else your company might have to upload documents to, they're probably not using Instanet. So just be aware, if you hit request review, if they're not using that, you're not going to get anywhere with that. Next to that is copy to cloud. It would let you copy this to a cloud service. So if you're managing your documents there, you could do that. Then you've got print, download, Authentisign, document markup tool. So what the markup tool lets you do, and I'll click on it here, it lets you draw on the document. So for example, if I need to redact something, I can click on redact, and then I can redact something. And then That lets me get rid of, I mean, let's remove it. I can move it where I need to, or I could come and highlight something, or I could draw an ellipse, a rectangle, freehand draw, add a text box. But whatever you do, you're physically doing to the document. So when it's printed, it's going to have those things on there. It's not like it's only on there when they view it on their computer. It's always going to be there. And so that's the markup. On the left here is the document slicer tool, and I'm not going to click on it, but what that would do is let you slice up the document. So let's say the agent was lazy, the listing agent, and they uploaded the property disclosure, the lead-based paint, the CC&Rs, all as one big 40-page document. Well, all you need are the 4 pages of the property disclosure. So you could go to Document Slicer and slice out the pages you need and get rid of the rest. That's what that's for. I'm going to hit close here, and I'm not going to save my changes. But that's what the and to bring up where we were before, I'm going to click on the document here. So that's what the markup tool is. And then right next to it is the document slicer, properties rename, and then you can rotate it or zoom in. So that's documents. And if I wanted to go from page to page, I can click on select page and choose the page that I want to go to. So I can see it there. And this I didn't specifically pick this listing for this reason, but this is a perfect example of a document that has really never been done on paper. It's been electronic the whole time. You'll notice this, like the signatures right here, this was done in Instanet. These X's, because they're identical, they were done in Instanet and they filled it out online. And so it's going to make it really easy with Instanet because that means that document's going to be 90 degrees straight in the signing. If someone has downloaded it, signed it by hand, and uploaded it, sometimes it can be off kilter a little bit. And so, when you see ones that are done electronically, it's going to be an easy Instanet as well. All right, so I'm going to close the document here. And then, of course, if I click on the little circle and go to the shopping basket, I can email, fax, almost all the exact same things we saw with the forms. The ones that are different, move lets me move it instead of copying it. There's merge would let me combine documents. So it's the anti-document slicer. So maybe the agent was really not tech savvy and uploaded 4 individual PDFs, 1 for each page of the disclosure. You can merge them to 1. That's what that lets you do. And then copy, upload to cloud, download zip, Instanet, print, fax, email. So that's that. Now, the thing about emailing that I'll mention about the documents here is, especially if you're dealing with someone that's not tech savvy, I mean, you may not think you're tech savvy, but you're sitting in front of a computer in a class. So that's more tech savvy than a lot of people. The reason is when you email documents, it's the same way as emailing a form. And the reason that's important is if you're emailing, you could download the property disclosure, you could email as an attachment from your own email program. You could totally do that. But if your client's not tech savvy and they don't know what to do with an attachment, you've got to give them directions in that email to download that attachment and view it. When you email it from Instanet, they get directions on what to do. So not only is it easier for them, it's going to look the same way as it did when you sent them those forms before. So I would probably email from the documents from Instanet as well, and then it also is in the transaction history. So the forms, obviously, you have to email those because they're electronic to begin with. But when you have a document, sometimes people want to just email it themselves, which you can do, but it just depends on your recipient what the process is going to be. But you could also email it from the transaction. So that's our documents. So we've talked about the forms, talked about documents. We're going to go to Instanet here in about 5 minutes. But before we go to Instanet, we're going to talk about the other items that are in our transaction here. Now, as we talk about these, if you're thinking, I've never heard of this, why does it do this? Why would I use this? Some of the things that are here, you may already have ways of doing. And especially if your broker has a way of managing transactions that you go online and you upload documents or you enter information, there's probably duplication in what Instanet has. Because the thing to remember is Instanet's used all over the country, and some places it's used and it's not connected to an MLS. Some places it's used only by a brokerage. And so they have a lot of things in here that may or may not be things that you need to use all the time. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is checklists. That's right under documents. What checklist is a checklist. It's people overcomplicate this all the time. It is a checklist. So like in the paper world, you've got a list of things. That's your checklist. That's what you're creating in Instanet. So if you already have a checklist that your broker's given you or that you use while you're doing a transaction with your buyer, you probably aren't going to put it in here as well. But if you don't have a way you're doing it, this is a great option. The thing that I'll say that would keep me personally from doing it if I was an agent, there's not an easy way to get to this on your mobile device. I mean, they do, if you have an iPhone, they have an iOS app. If you have Android, you can get to it on an Android device, but you're still going into your transaction. So you're logging into Instanet, going to your transaction, going to checklist to finally get to it. Whereas depending on what you might be using, you may just have an app, you tap on it, there's your checklist right there. So it all depends on what you're using. So with a checklist, now before I add something here, just like we created a transaction template, you actually could go in and create a checklist ahead of time, and then you could add it to your transactions. Brokers could create checklists and have them automatically added for their agents. The thing about brokers using Instanet to manage transactions, which I think a lot of them that might have been doing it aren't even doing it anymore, is because the Idaho realtors are crazy. Not as a group of people, but as an organization. Because, and if you have been around a while, you'll know what I'm talking about. We've had Instanet for like 6 years. Well, a year and a half ago, they wanted to get rid of Instanet and have form simplicity. And the process of that, we're not going to get into. But obviously, we still have Instanet, which means form simplicity didn't do what it was supposed to do. And so they didn't get rid of both of them. So now we have 2 different forms programs. Well, because of that wishy-washy decision-making on forms programs, people that had been using Instanet thought, oh, the Instanet's going away. And then they started using form simplicity. And then Instanet stayed. And they're like, well, what am I going to use now? Because at the end of November 2019, they could both go away, which is true. So most brokers have their own way outside of the forms program to manage transactions. Not all do, and some small brokerages are using one or the other, and that's not a bad thing. But if you're at a larger office and you're like, I've never heard that Instanet had checklists, that's why, because your broker has another way to do it. So to add an item in here, I would go to add checklist item, and then I would type what it is. So let's say it's going to be a document, and there's some already preset ones in here. So let's say it's the pre-approval letter, and I hit save. So now I've got a checklist to upload the pre-approval letter. If I upload it, it goes to my documents. Yeah?
I lost control of my mouse.
That's not good.
And I checked.
Oh, no, I think this is totally locked.
Okay.
That's what you gave me. But luckily, everything can be saved. All right, so once it gets up there, back into your transaction, and then perfect. We'll make sure it works. All right, so you can go in here and you can add items to your checklist. So I just added this pre-approval letter. The little icon there would let me upload it. It uploads it, and then it would put that in the documents part of my transaction. I also could add other things. So I'm going to go back here to add checklist item. And let's say I want to add a task. Let's say, and then put a name in for it. Let's say it's going to be the home inspection. And then there's a task tab up here at the top. And then I can put details like a due date and other information if I want. You can put a due date in there, and Instanet can email you notifications or reminders about it if you want that to happen. Again, but it's not going to synchronize with your phone or your calendar. It's just going to email you those. So let's say I need to be 10 days before the closing date. And if I want a reminder, then it would send me a reminder via email. And then now I've got this task on my checklist. So that's how checklists would work. You would just add the things you want to put in there. Over on the right below checklist, it says tasks. So I added the task onto my checklist. But I can go to tasks, and that task is here. But I also could add tasks to the task list that are not on the checklist. So not all tasks are on the checklist, which is confusing. But again, if it's confusing, you probably have an easier way that you're doing this. Exactly. I used to not talk about these, but everyone would always ask. So I'm like, I'm just going to start talking about it so they know what they do. The biggest thing is don't overthink it. It's exactly as it sounds. It's a list of tasks. It's a checklist. That's exactly as they sound. Yeah.
So if we went in and did the checklist like you just did, And then you wanted to, is it best just to go to tasks afterwards to add to the checklist?
Well,
Going
if
back into
you
the
well,
checklist?
if you want it on the checklist, it's got to be added here. So if you want to add a task, so if you added a task in the task list, it wouldn't be on here.
Oh, so you always want to go back.
Yeah, if you want it on the checklist, you want it here. Yep, that's right. That's tasks and checklist. The next one's call logs. Like it sounds, it's a place for you to track your calls. So if you don't have a tool to do that already, you could come here and do that. When you click on add, it lets you add a call log, and everything's required. So who's the caller? It was the buyer. Who's the subject? It was the seller. And they hate them or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
They cussed me out.
That's right. They kicked me out of the house or whatever. Anyway, so then you hit save, and when you save a call log, it gives you this red phone icon, meaning it has not been dealt with yet. So basically, you're putting things on here that you need to do or you haven't finalized or haven't taken care of. And when you click on that little red phone icon, it'll say, do you want to mark this as dealt with? When you hit yes, it seems to have disappeared, but it really didn't disappear. You'll notice this little filter up here with a number 1 on it. That means you're filtering by something. When I click on that filter, I can also indicate that I want to see dealt with and not dealt with. So now the seller, what I just created is there, it's got a green phone. But it always defaults to showing you the things you have to do, which I guess makes sense because they don't want you to forget to do something. So, but if you want to see them all, you can come here and change the filter. And there's not a way to change the way the default that works. It's always going to show you the ones you have to deal with. So, but that's the call log. Now, the last thing I'll say about the checklist, tasks, and call logs is that there isn't a way to get those out of Instanet. So like all your forms, all your contracts, all your documents, that can all be exported. But the call logs, checklists, and tasks cannot. So if you were not using Instanet anymore, I mean, other than like printing a screenshot, there's not really a way to download all that data. So that's probably another reason why brokers may or may not be using it, is that the accountability is only within Instanet. So, all right, so that's the call logs. The last one on here, which is very useful and very important, is history. The history shows the history of the transaction, everything we did. So like you scroll down, it shows when we created the transaction, the forms were copied in the minute we created it. And then we added information, added contacts. And then, let's see, where's it at? Here it is. At 10:43, I emailed a form. And if I click on form emailed or I click on the I on the right, it will tell me who I emailed it to and what I emailed. So I emailed at 10:43 a read-only version of the RE21 to Willie Evans, and his email address was imlstrainer@gmail.com. So if Willie tells me he didn't get the email, I could come here and verify where I sent it. And so maybe instead of imlstrainer@gmail.com, he tells me, well, that's my old one. My new email address is imlstrainerisawesome@gmail.com. And so now I can resend it to him. So this, I mean, again, you're not going to get a bounce back or that they didn't get the email message, but you can see where you sent it to and verify that that happened. Same thing like I mentioned with the fax earlier. You can see where it went. So that way you know who's getting it. So that's the history. And the thing with history that's useful is I watched enough Law and Order to tell you that third-party verification is better than first-party. Third-party means you aren't Instanet, you don't own Instanet, you don't pay Instanet. They are separated from you. And you may or may not know, you can take your computer, disconnect it from the internet, change the date and time to January 1st, 1950, create a document, and the creation date of that Word document will say January 1st, 1950, which we all know is impossible. Because Bill Gates in his diapers did not create Word. And so by having a third party verifying when you did things, you can make sure that you sent things when you said you did. You can verify when it happened or that you've done things in the order you said you did them in. And so the history can be really useful for that. So that's the history. We've talked about the call logs and checklists and everything. Questions about anything we've talked about so far? Now, you might be thinking, Chris, this is taking an hour. I would never use this for a transaction. What I will tell you is, if you already knew the property and you already knew your buyers, it would take you 20 minutes to get the forms done, other than filling them out themselves. Obviously, filling them out will take time. But if you were already a pro at filling out the forms, it would take you 20 minutes to do what we've done already, if not quicker. So it's taken us an hour because we're all going together and we're all talking about it, or I'm talking about it at least. But in a real scenario, it would be a lot faster process. So, all right. So we're going to talk about Authentisign. And this is another difference. Well, I'm not trying to badmouth form simplicity, but I think it's important to point out the differences, because when I do the form simplicity class, I point out the differences that it has with Instanet as well. A couple other differences. You'll notice the times here are Mountain Time. When you look at a history of a transaction in form simplicity, it is Eastern Time, because they're in Florida. The other thing we're going to do it here in a second is you'll notice that signings is right here. The Authentisign is part of our transaction. In form simplicity, eSign is a separate website. Now you get to it from the forms. It's not, I mean, you click eSign, it takes you there. But every time you want to go back and view the signing history or view the progress, you're leaving form simplicity and you're going to eSign, which means when you come back to form simplicity, you're not on your transaction anymore. So you've got to click active transactions, click on the name of your transaction, and then you're there. In Instanet, here's my signings. I would click on a signing, but I'm still right here in my transaction for anything I need to work with. So to me, that makes it simpler. That's just my opinion. So we want to go here to signings over on the right. That's Authentisign. And we haven't done any signings yet. It says empty, none found. And so that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a signing. Now, before we click on it, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do so you know where we're headed. We're going to create a signing. We're going to put a signing name in there. We're going to add our fake buyer. We're going to pull in our forms we want them to sign. We're going to see how to drag and drop the initials and signatures if we need to do that. We're going to send it off, and then we're going to check your own email and then go through and sign it as if you were that fake person. And then we'll see how that process happens. So to create our signing, we want to click on add up here like we've done a few times already. And then we want to put a signing name in there. Now the signing name is going to be seen by everybody. So don't put in signing name, the Evans can't afford this house, because they're going to see that as the name. The other thing with the name is, as you have more than one signing for a transaction, give each signing its own unique name. I've talked to people on the phone many times who are asking about a signing. We go to Authentisign, and they have 5 signings called Christensen House. And then they have to click on all 4 of them or whatever to find the one they're looking for. Had they just named them, you know, Christensen House 1, Christensen House 2, that would be a lot easier. So you can give it any name you want. I would recommend giving it a unique name. Since we haven't done one yet, I'm going to call mine offer number 1, but you can call it anything you want. And we want go to new signing checked. And then as soon as we hit save, it's going to take us there. So enter your name, leave go to new signing checked, and then click save. And if there's a system message, click here to continue. And then it should bring you here to Authentisign. And we should be on step 1. Is that coming up for everybody? Did everybody else have the system message? Okay. Well, if you didn't get it, you probably will get it. And if you got it, you'll probably get it again. I think they actually come up like 2 times or 3 times. Just hit click to continue. Now, before we go through our signing, just to mention, we're still in our transaction, because over on the right is this little horizontal menu, and there's all the parts of our transaction. So I could easily get back. So maybe I'm working on it here, and I remember that I didn't fill out a form all the way. I could go back to my forms right from here. I don't have to go anywhere different. So step 1 of our signing, there's 5 steps. Step 1 is the signing name and participant order. The signing name, we already put in there, but you could change it if you wanted to. You still change it. Participant order, sign in line, and simul sign. So sign in line means they sign in order. So if you have more than one signer, first person gets their invitation, they go in and sign it, and then the second person gets theirs and they go in and sign it. The subsequent people do not know they're waiting. They only get their invitation when it's their turn. Some reason sign in line is useful. If you're double ending a transaction, your buyers have to sign the offer before your sellers do. Sign in line lets you put them in order. If you're using a reviewer, sign in line lets you put them in order so the reviewer can be before the signers. Simul sign lets everyone sign all together. So it doesn't matter what order they sign in, it sends it to everybody at the same time. So it's up to you which one you're going to choose. Now, the one thing I'll say about sign in line, which makes me prefer it over simul sign, is if the people you're sending emails to are less tech savvy, sign in line is easier, because sign in line is the real world. When they're at your office and they're going to sign a contract, they don't wrestle each other to sign at the same time. One person signs it, and then the other person signs it. That's what sign in line is. And if you have people that share an email address, the first thing that should tell you is they are not, well, I shouldn't say they're not tech savvy, but email is not their primary form of communication because they're sharing an email address. And if they're sharing an email address and they use Gmail, Hotmail, or Yahoo or something, then it does this thing called Conversation View, which I'm just bringing up here so you can see it. What Conversation View does is it puts the emails from the same recipient with the same subject into a conversation, so it's easy to see them. So if you and I were emailing back and forth our lunch plans, we could easily see, oh, I want to go to Panera. Oh, I don't like Panera. Let's go to Cafe Rio or whatever it is. You would see those messages together. Gmail or Yahoo or whoever, they don't know that Authentisign isn't a person. And so if you do simul-sign, where it comes all at once, and they share an email account, this is how it looks. And this message is for Charity. This message is for Willie. But they would need to know that that's another message right there. Whereas sign in line, even though the conversation view still happens, for sign in line, Willie's came all by itself. And then Charity's came. So that may not be a big deal. And there's a way when you're finishing your signing, if you change the subject, it won't make conversation view happen. But the easiest one to let you get away with forgetting to change the subject is sign in line. Now, the big negative about sign in line is you put them in the order, and once you've sent it off, you can't change the order. So you just have to make sure if you're using sign in line, just ask them, is there one of you that can sign before the other? Just so that you put them in the right order. Because many times people have used sign in line, and then they will send it off, and then the second person says, oh, I want to sign it first. Oh, my spouse can't sign it until after work at 5 o'clock, but I want to sign it right now at 1 o'clock. And you can't change it. I mean, you could set up a new signing, but now that person at 5 o'clock has 2 signings that they have to deal with. So think about how things work in the physical world, paper world 30 years ago. If you had a courier going to somebody's house to sign some documents, you wouldn't just give the documents to the guy on the bike and say, hey, good luck, hope they're home. You would say, I've talked to my buyers. They're going to be home at 7 o'clock tonight. Could you please go at 7 o'clock and have them sign these? You would ask the questions. So I guess the thing to remember is you're the human being. You're in control. You choose how it's going to work. Once you've made your choices, you got to live with them. You can't, I mean, the sign in line, and the reason it's set up that way is if you can manipulate it all throughout the process, it's not secure. That's the whole thing. So hopefully I've talked enough about sign in line and simul-sign to make you choose which one you want to use. I mean, it's up to you. Just know they're different. So I'm going to leave it on sign in line. The advanced options here, expiration dates. You really don't need expiration dates because all your contracts have dates. If the offer expires on Saturday and they sign it on Sunday, sucks to be them. They missed the deadline. That's not going to work. So an expiration date doesn't necessarily matter. But reminders are awesome. Reminders let Authentisign nag them about signing their documents instead of you having to text them and email them and call them and say, have you signed this yet? Have you signed this yet? And the shortest period of time is 4 hours, and every 4 hours it can send them a reminder to sign their documents. So they go to bed at night, if they sleep 8 hours, they got 2 reminders while they were sleeping to sign those documents. And I had someone say, that sounds so annoying. Exactly, that's why it's awesome. Because it's going to remind them to go in and do it. And if it's a time-sensitive thing, that's what you want. And of course, you wouldn't only let Authentisign if it's time-sensitive. You would also be encouraging them to sign these documents. But they're going to get that link in that email every 4 hours. So,
if they sign it, will they continue getting the reminders? Or
no, they won't. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, so the reminders are only going to go to the people who have not completed it. Now, if they think they've finished it and they haven't, they're still going to get reminders. So, but when you go through the signing this morning, you're going to see when you get to the end, it says finished. If it didn't say finished and you closed it early, I mean, you're not done. I mean, it gives you feedback that you're done, so they would know. All right, so that's step 1. Other questions or comments about step 1? All right, so let's go down here to step 2. Click on the plus next to step 2. Now, because we came from a transaction, all of our transaction people are here, and we want to select our buyer, and it's going to have their name, your email address, and then the default option for a buyer or a seller is remote signer, and that's what we want to leave it on. What remote signer means is they're going to get an email, they're going to click on a link on their own computer and sign the documents, or their phone or whatever. We'll talk about what the other ones are, but we want to leave it on remote signer. In-person signer means they're with you. They're using your device. And so you get the email, not them. Because you're doing in-person signing, there's an additional required field that it will prompt you to put in what's called a signing host PIN. Basically, you make up a PIN number to verify you're with them. You know, it could be the PIN number for your key. It could be your ATM PIN number. No one's going to know what it is, but you need to know it. And so how in-person signing would work is you would get the email sent to your email account. You would open up your email. You would click on the link, give the device to the signer. They would go through and sign the whole thing. Then when they're done, they would give it back to you, and you'd put the PIN number in. Now, the reason that exists is for security. When it's a remote signer, the first level of security is their email account. Again, they're probably the only ones that get into that, so they know the login and password. With in-person signing, that doesn't exist. So there's an extra layer of security, which is the signing host PIN number. Now, in remote signing, if you needed it to be more secure, you can put a PIN number for the signing in there as well. So you might have an email address, let's say, and I'm going to make this up, but I'm sure it's happened before. You might have, let's say you have an estate that you've got three siblings that are running it. They're all getting the emails, but one of them is the executor. So you put the PIN number in on the signing, and then you text it to the executor, so they're the one that can go in and sign it instead of everybody being able to sign it. So that's how that PIN number thing, that password would work, or PIN number. But if signing host PIN, you have to have that with an in-person signer. Reviewer. This is not someone who signs anything, but they're reviewing the documents. And if you're doing sign in line, you can put the reviewer in order so they can review it first. And if they don't approve of the documents, it stops the signing. So maybe your signers have an attorney or your broker or someone else needs to review them. The thing to remember with a reviewer is the review has to happen. They can't skip the review. If the review doesn't happen, the signing's never finished. I don't think as an agent you ever have to make yourself a reviewer, and I will explain to you why I wouldn't do that. We had an agent, this is a few months ago, that called in. He was frustrated because everybody had signed everything, but he had not gotten the emails back yet. And he had to go in and manually download the documents to be able to send them to the other agent. And we pulled up his AuthentiSign to figure out what happened, and he had made himself a reviewer. And so that's what I noticed. I said, well, you're set as a reviewer, and you didn't ever go in and do your review. And then the agent said, well, I didn't think I needed to do the review because I knew what they said. Exactly. That's why you shouldn't make yourself a reviewer. But whoever a reviewer is, they have to go in and do the review. And if you set your broker up as a reviewer, make sure the broker goes in and does it. I mean, what I'm talking about, the signing's never finished. No one gets any emails with signed documents because it's not done. That review has to happen. So before you put a reviewer in, just make sure they're going to do it. Yeah.
So when they're reviewing it, do they just click they've reviewed it, or they have to sign they reviewed it?
They don't sign it. They just click accept or decline.
Accept it.
Yeah. Yep. And I think they have a place if they hit decline, they have a place to enter notes.
Oh.
Like what changes have to be made. And then CC only is at the end when all the signing and reviewing is done. Whoever's a CC gets a copy of the documents as well. So like maybe a transaction coordinator, a co-agent. But any documents that are signed, they would get them all. People a lot of times will say, well, if the listing agent is the CC, you can do that. But if you're doing the buyer rep, the person sale agreement, and the disclosure, they're getting all three of those. And maybe the buyer rep isn't something you want them to get. So you just be aware whoever is a CC gets everything.
And you don't have to sign anything on the CC.
Right. They just get an email at the end. Yep. All right. So we want our buyer here is a remote signer, and then we want to hit add. That'll add them into our signing. Now, like I mentioned, I'm doing 2 signers just so that way I can go through it twice. The other reason is to explain if you had more than one signer, you will see arrows below their names letting you change the order. This doesn't change their names on the forms. That was done by their order on the contact list. This just lets you choose who's signing first. And of course, if it's simul-sign, it doesn't matter the order. But sign in line, Willie will be first, Charity will be second. And if you're missing something, like for a signer, it might be their email address. You'll see a red hand up here. If you see a red hand, you've got to click on there and put in whatever you're missing because it won't let you move on to the next step until you've got everything set here for your signers, your participants. Other comments or questions about participants? All right, so let's go to step 3, documents. So this will bring up the documents in our transaction. So we want to pick the RE21 and the RE14 and probably the property condition report as well, the seller's property condition. And you'll notice on the right side where it says source, you've got Instanet Forms and then DocBox. The contracts from the Idaho Realtors that the source is Instanet Forms, most of those are going to have a layout that the Idaho Realtors have created that puts the initials and signatures wherever they go. The one that says DocBox, meaning we uploaded it or it came in from the listing, is not going to have that layout, and we're going to have to manually drag and drop the initials. And so it just depends on where the form came from that you're using, the document came from, if it'll have a layout or not. And I've had people say, well, the RE25, they have a layout for that. They do if you're using it as a form for the seller. But when you're uploading it for the buyer, they don't have a layout for that. All right, so we want to check the forms we're going to use and then click Add. Just like our participants, if you have more than one form they're going to sign, once they get up here, you'll be able to change the order. The ones that have the layout have the little yellow rectangle. The one that doesn't, there's no rectangles there, but I could change the order if I want. Maybe I want the RE14 first. I could do that, or I could make it second, whatever you want to do. Add would let you go add an additional forms or documents. Link, you don't need to worry about. Link doesn't really do anything. And then step 4, that's design. So we want to go to step 4 now. Click there. And that's going to load all of those documents as one long document. And then this is where, if you needed to, and we will with our property disclosure, if you needed to drag and drop initials and signatures for your signers to use. Now, before we jump in and start looking at the documents that are here, over on the right, you've got a menu. At the top, it says signers. So if you have more than one signer, this is where you would select whose initials and signature you're working with. Drag and drop, these are all the things your signer can do. A required signature, an optional signature, a required initial, an optional initial. When the items are optional, they can either accept or decline them. If they decline them, then obviously they're not signing, you're initialing that. You can do a group of initials. The red box is a required checkbox. The blue one is optional. The drag and drop radio buttons. So radio buttons are going to be a scenario where they have more than one choice, but they have to make a choice. The example of the radio button that you'll see in the RE21 is AM and PM. They'll have to mark AM or PM. They can't skip it. Then you've got a drag and drop date. Signer name would be like a printed name. And then initial pages is a shortcut to add multiple initials to a document. So we'll see that in a minute when we get to the property disclosure. So drag and drop are things your client can do. Markup are things you can do. When we looked at the documents in the transaction, we kind of saw markup there as well. But here I could draw a line. I could highlight. I could draw a rectangle, an ellipse. I can freehand draw. The thing to remember is any of those things you do are permanently on the document. And then, of course, I can add text. So the draw text can be useful because maybe you forgot to type in one line on the contract. You don't have to go all the way back to the forms and edit it. Now, the thing to remember is you're not editing the form. You're only editing this copy and Authentisign. But you could go in and type something in if you needed to. So that's the draw. That's the draw text.
If you want to add something to an addendum, or if you want to add something to like adding refrigerator.
Right, yeah. If you forgot to put it on the form, you could do that here. I mean, it would be just for a few, probably I would say just a couple lines at the most.
Okay.
But it's just there to let you,
right,
you forgot to add it in there. Yep. So that's markup. Zoom lets you zoom in or out. If it's too big or too small, you can zoom in or out. Page lets you choose the page you want to go on to, that you want to go to. And then we get to layouts. So I already kind of mentioned that the Idaho Realtors have layouts for their forms. But when you drag and drop initials and signatures, you can save that as a layout for yourself. So in a few minutes, we're going to drag and drop initials on the property disclosure. When you get done doing that, you could save that as a layout. And so the next time you have a disclosure, you just apply your layout and not have to drag and drop again. So that's what layouts is. And so we'll see layouts in a minute, but that's what they are. And then options, clear, exit, save changes, print, download. That's pretty self-explanatory. So here we are. I've got the RE21 here. As I scroll down, you'll notice there are the initials and the dates on the bottom there. That's the layout from the Idaho Realtors. So at the bottom of each of those pages are the initials and the dates. And then on the last page, page 7, there's their signatures. There's the radio button for AM and PM. This is another difference with Authentisign and the e-sign. With eSign, the layout has them type in the time. Here, it automatically populates it. They're going to click on their name. When they sign it, they click on that. It fills all the rest of that in. Late acceptance at the bottom of the RA21. That is on there by default via the layout. If you don't want to use it, you can select either the initial or right-click on the initial and choose delete, and that will get rid of it if you don't want it. It only gets rid of it in this signing. Every time you use it, the layout has it, so it'll always be there. But you can get rid of it if you don't want it. The only reason I mention that is we had an office call that say agents don't pay attention, and they have that on there all the time, and they may not realize what it is. So if you don't want it, take it off. Here's the RE14, bottom of the first page. There's the initials and the dates. And then the middle of the second page, we've got limited dual agency and single agency. Now, again, I'm not going to pretend to tell you what those mean. I don't know how to fill the forms out. But I do know if they initial both of those, the form is invalid. So you would talk to your clients and explain what limited dual agency and single agency mean. And then you would say, which one do you want to do? In the paper world, you then would take your little Post-it note that says initial here, and you'd put it by whichever one they said they wanted to do. You wouldn't put it on both. So if you've talked to them, you can come and you remove the one you don't need. You just click on it and click this little trash can, or right-click on it and click delete, and then it gets rid of that. Now, these are still optional, so you want to verify, hey, you still need to make sure you hit accept so that they are there. I had someone tell me that they always get rid of all 4 of them and they drag over required ones. You can do that if you want, but I personally think that's, since it's already on here, every time you do it, you're going to have to delete 4 things and drag 2 over, whereas you can just delete 2 and just verify with your client that has a pulse and a brain that they accept the things they need to accept. So that's, but it's up to you. But just know they're going to be there every time. And then here's the initials, and then the signatures at the bottom of the RE14. Questions about the layout from the Idaho Realtors or how that would work? And again, we're talking about all this. Those forms make it really quick to send them out. Yeah.
So can you please repeat the part where you can save that layout?
Well, we haven't created the layout yet. When we create the layout, we'll talk about it. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Is we haven't done our layout yet, so we can't say anything. All right, so here is the RE25, the seller's property disclosure. And at the bottom of the first page, there's a place here for the buyer's initials. Now, there are 2 ways to add initials. The first way is the obvious one. I go here to drag and drop, click on the red initial here, and I drag it over. And then to add the date, I right-click, choose Add Date Stamp, and then when they click to add their initial, the date is added. I have 2 signers, so then I would need to go up here and change it to charity and do the same thing again. And on every page, I would have to do that. Now, there's only 3 pages they're going to initial, because the 4th page they sign. So it's not that tedious. But if you've got multiple, let's say you have 10 pages or 20 pages that people need to initial, if you're dragging and dropping and changing the name every page, that can be kind of tedious and frustrating. So that's where this option for initial pages comes in. So I'm going to get rid of my initial that I just added here. So when you go to drag and drop and click on initial pages, what that's going to let you do is have Authentisign put the initials somewhere along the bottom here, and then you move them where you need them to go. But it puts the initials for all your signers, so you don't have to go up and change the name every time. So I mean, just to show you the contrast here, if I'm adding the initials for Willie and Charity, there's Willie's, I'm adding the date, then I got to go up here and change it to Charity, drag hers down, and then add the date. And on every page, I would have to do that. Now, this is only 3 pages, but that still could be a process that I don't want to take as long as it has to. So initial pages, we'll put the initials on the page, just not exactly where they go. But the big thing is I don't have to go change the name. I just move them. So I'm going to click on initial pages here. And it's going to ask you some questions. Who's going to be the initialing? It's going to be the buyers. What are they initialing? The disclosure. And it is pages 1 through 3.
So then it populates at the bottom of each
Right. It doesn't put them exactly where they go, but it puts them at the bottom of the page.
So you have to move them?
Yeah, you still have to move them.
Okay.
And so like if you have 1 person, it's not really saving you time. But if you have 2, you're not having to go up and change the name each time.
Yeah.
So then I hit continue. And now here are the initials here at the bottom. I just move them where I want. I can still just come here, add the date stamp. And now I've got those there. The next page, here are the initials. So it just makes it a little quicker, especially if you've got more than 1 signer, it can be useful. but that's what initial pages does. And then once you have all these where you want, let me get my next page here. This is when you would save your, well, after you add the signatures is when you would save your layout, which we'll do here in a few minutes. But you're going to drag and drop these, put them where they go. And I've had people say, do you have to have a date for both of them? I'm just imitating what the Idaho Realtors do. They have dates. They have two. When the layout came out for my signers, they had 2 initials and 2 dates. That's what I'm doing. I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to guess why or why not they may not have it. So I'm just picking, doing what they did. And then here is the last page, and we need to add their signatures here. So you would go up here to drag and drop, click sign here and drag it over and put it where they're going to click to add their signature. Now, you can either click on the little cog or you can right click on the signature and you have some options. Flip vertical moves the sign here from the top to the bottom, so you're not covering up the writing. They want to be able to read it. Flip horizontal moves it left to right. Add date stamp. We know that that does the date. And then in this contract, you don't need it, but you'll notice the seller, the sellers have it. If I want their printed name there, I can right click and choose add name block. And now I've got the printed name. And so now that's ready for Willie to sign. Then I would come up here to change it to charity and do the same thing. Drag down, then I'm just going to make it match the sign here. I'm going to choose flip vertical. I'm going to add the date stamp. And then I'm going to add the name block just as we did on the other one. Now the name is there. And so now that's where they would sign those documents. So dragging and dropping the signatures, does that make sense? So at this point, before you hit next to send it off, this is where you could save your layout. To save a layout, you just click layouts and then hit apply layout. And you want to make sure you only save a layout for the things that you did. So in this case, it's the property condition. And then, oh wait, I didn't hit save layout. I hit select layout, sorry. Save as layout. You're probably all doing that and I wasn't. All right, so I'm going to go to seller's property condition. Now I could change the name. So maybe I want to call this RE25 2017. And now when I hit save, now this layout has been saved for the next time I use it. And it isn't saved for Willie and Charity. It's saved for signer 1 and signer 2. Or if you have one person, signer 1. So the next time you have a signing for the property disclosure, you could come here to layouts and do apply layout, choose your layout, and it will put the same thing that you put in there. This disclosure is a perfect layout example to use because like I mentioned earlier, this one has been all electronic. It wasn't scanned and uploaded. If you're working with one that was scanned and uploaded and it's a little off kilter and you save that as a layout, every time you work with one that's not off kilter, you've got to drag them around now. And it may just be a little bit, but that's going to be a little bit annoying every time you have to do it. So it depends on how OCD you are or whatever you want to do. What I would probably do so I could have it correct, I would probably I would get a good copy of the RE25 before I have a transaction and create that layout. So when I do have a transaction that I needed, I already have it. But you can also do it like we just did when you have one for a signing. But does that make sense how to save a layout? And if you need to edit or delete, well, I shouldn't say edit, but if you need to delete layouts, not where we are here, but when you're actually looking at AuthentiSign at your signings, in AuthentiSign, not in your transaction, and I'll try to remember to show you where this is before we get done, you can delete your layouts there. Every time before I have class, I have to go in and delete my layouts so I don't have them on there so I can save them again. But you can save layouts. So that's how you would save that and then apply layout unless you use the next time. So we got our signatures and initials everywhere we need to have them. So now we're ready to send this off and see how the signing works. So you want to click next at the top. And then, like I mentioned earlier, if you have people that share an email address and you forgot to change it or you wanted to change the subject, you can hit this customize invitation and you can change the subject or their email address. So maybe Charity tells me she has a different email address. I can come here and change the email address. If I want to change the subject, Willie, here are your forms. Charity, please sign sign these. And then that would be the subject. And by changing the subject, it stops the conversation view. So, and then you hit save, and then hit sending invitations, hit send invitations to send them. So I'm gonna hit send invitations here. If you haven't done that yet, you can do it. And then when it tells you they were sent, when you click on OK, now before we go check our email, where it brings you is to your list of signings in the transaction. There's 3 different icons that you'll see here. The one we're not going to see is the little cogs, like gears, looks like this kind of. Those cogs are going to be there, meaning you have not sent this off yet. It's still being created. The lightning bolt means you've sent it off and you're awaiting signatures. When the signing is totally completed, it'll be a blue ribbon. You can click on the name of the signing and see the process. So here I can see that it's been sent off, but neither of my signers have authenticated nor signed these documents. So you can see where they are in the process. And you can always come back here and look at that. Just if I click on the little transaction house here to go back to my list of transactions, maybe I just got into Instanet and I want to see what's happening with the signing. I click on the name of my transaction, click on signings, and there I can just click on the status right there to see what's going on. And of course I can hit the back button, I can hit refresh, whatever I need to do. So what we want to do now is, if you haven't already, go check your email. Whether you want to check it on your computer or your phone, it's up to you. And then you should get an invitation, which I think mine's probably going to be there. You should get an invitation from AuthentiSign to have you sign it. And that's what we want to do, is go through and sign those documents. I'll sign mine here in a second as well. And then we'll talk about our signing when we're done. Everybody starting to get their emails? I don't think you are. All right. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to sign it twice. So I'm going to sign it once on here and once on the phone. So hopefully it will work. Hopefully, meaning in my technology, will work. I don't worry about AuthentiSign. So you get the email. This is what they get: signing participant invitation. Click here to sign. And if they've signed before, it'll remember them. Like if they picked their font or something, or if they sign it with their finger or their mouse. And so if they want to change how their signature is going to look, they can go here to select font style. They can choose, maybe they want the one that looks like a signature, or they could choose draw signature and draw it if they want. If they don't want to see this splash screen again, they can check that box. Most people aren't going to pay attention to that. But then they just click accept, and then to begin signing it, they click start. And then it's going to move them from place to place as they click to add their initial or signature. And here's the end of the RE21. I got to do AM or PM. And now here's that optional one on the RE14, accept or decline.
You need to tell them they need to hit the PM, because probably a lot of people wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, it won't let them finish it if they don't.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, letting them know they have to do that's a good thing, but it'll also make sure they have to do it before they finish it. So yeah, they can't skip it. And then here we are on the RE25. Now, before I finish signing this, just to show you, I'm going to click back on my signing here, and now I'll be able to see that Willie has authenticated, but he has not finished signing yet because I haven't finished the signing. So if your person says they've signed everything and it still has a little stopwatch, they haven't. They're missing something. And so let me go back here to my signing. So here I am, 94%, 100%, complete signing. This is how you can tell if it doesn't come up and say complete signing, they're not done. So now I hit complete signing, and it says thank you. Now, if they've never signed before, my next person will get this message. It might prompt them for a password. They don't have to create a password. The password is only there if they, on their own, want to go look at the signing history. They don't care about that. They don't have to do a password. And it gives them an option that says create password and no thanks. So it's up to them. So now I'm going to sign here, and hopefully my phone will work like I want it to. All right, so here is my phone, and here is my email to charity. And I'm going to click on click here to sign. If they've signed before on their phone and they've written their signature, it'll remember that. I think this person will have the signature remembered, but I'll redraw it anyway just to show you. So if they want to draw the signature, they hit draw signature, and then they draw it in the box here. And then they hit next, and then they add their initials. And then when they hit accept, then just like the other person, they're going to hit start, and then they just tap everywhere to add the initial or signature. And whether they have a stylus or they type it with their finger, doesn't matter. And there's accept or decline. And now we're on the RE25. There's the last one, complete signing. And here is that add password and no thanks. They do not have to do a password. So no thanks. And then it says, congratulations, you're done. And then once all the signers have signed their part of it, then the email goes out with the final documents in it. And the same email goes out to everyone. And the thing with the email with the final documents is it's a link, and then you can either download them or you can print them. But when that email comes, which I'll get here shortly, the one thing it does not tell you to do is to print it. I mean, to view it. Sorry, just say print. So hopefully we'll get it here shortly. While I'm waiting for mine to come through, for those that were going through the signing process, does that make sense? Did it work? Seeing some nods, questions about it? I mean, it's one of those things that as you go through and do it a couple times and you feel confident in how it works, it makes it a lot easier to share it with someone and say, hey, I've done this already. You can go in and do it as well. All right. So here is my email. And again, the same email comes to everybody. It has their own name there. And you'll notice it says to save or print. Click here. It does not say view. The reason that's important is it's a secure signed document. In Adobe Reader, the free PDF viewer that most people have, you can't save a copy of a secure document. It will save a blank copy. So if you want to save this to your computer, when you click on that link, most times your computer is going to give you the option, do you want to open or save this? You want to choose save. I'm going to choose open just to show you what happens, but I'll come back and hit save. Because you can always go back and click the link again if you need to get it again. When I click open, it's going to open up an Adobe Reader, and I just have the free version of Adobe Reader here. If I go up here to File and Save, you're going to save a blank copy of this form. And you're like, I don't want that, I need the signatures. So you can't save it if you're viewing it. But when I click on that link, I can choose to save it to my computer, and then it downloads it. And then I could take this, and now that it's on my computer, I can copy it, put it on my desktop. I can put it in my documents. I can put it wherever I need to. I can move it anywhere I want, copy it, put it wherever I want it to be, now that it's on my computer. So when you choose to save it, then you can do what you need to do with it. Especially if you want to make sure you have a copy of it, save it first. So now I'm going to open it up. It's just a PDF, so it opens up an Adobe Reader or whatever PDF viewer you're using. And as I scroll down here on the first page, there's the initials and signatures. If I mouse over these, it gives me the date, time, and IP address where they were signed. And then on the last page, we get the signatures. And the RE21 is a perfect way to show you that even though you're putting the date and time in there, below the signature, it has the date and time. And I had someone say, well, why do they have a place with the date and time in there? There are still people that fill these out by hand. They type them on a typewriter, they fill them out by hand, and so they have those fields still there. But the signatures already have the initials and date and time below it. Or the date and time below it, I should say. And so here's the RE14. And if we go to the second page here, that's not what I want. There we go. If I zoom in here, if I mouse over these, it shows that it's an optional initial that was accepted. It indicates what it was. and then it gives the date, time, and IP address of when it was signed. And then here is the RE25. At the bottom of it, bless you, here's the initials. And you'll notice the other initials from there don't have anything on them because it was a flattened document we put in there, like a scanned document. And then there's their initials, and then their signatures here on the last page. And so that's the version of the documents that everyone would get. What's sent to you, what's sent to them, one long document. So the problem with this one long document is, if I want to send this to the other agent, maybe I don't want them to have the seller, the buyer rep agreement. So I'm going to go back here to my transaction. Now, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the dashboard of Instanet here just to go in like I was going in fresh. So I go here to my list of transactions, and I click on the transaction name. And if I go here to signings, you'll notice now it's a blue ribbon. I can click on the name of the signing, and I can see all the information about it. They both signed and authenticated. Here are the document versions. Revision 1 has only the first signers. Revision 2 has only the second. Final document, we just looked at that. It has everything. Then here are separated signed documents you can download. The other thing you can do, though, I'm going to go here to the little menu at the top to go to part of my transaction. If you create a signing from a transaction, when you go to documents, any signed documents go to the documents part of the transaction. So you'll notice I have 3 separated documents that have locks on them. So I can come here, choose the property disclosure and the RE21, and then I can click the little basket and I can email those to the listing agent right from here. So it's all part of the transaction. It's all in the transaction history. And when you view them as documents, they're separated here, so they're not all one long document. That lock means it came through Authentisign and it's been signed. So they're already separated here in the documents. Whereas when you get it sent to you, it's just one long document. Does that make sense? Questions about the signing process?
You don't really have to put the date. Will show the date.
It will, but what I would, again, the Idaho Realtors layout has it on there. So, I mean, I agree with you. It's already there. I don't think someone could say there's no date on there, because there is a date. But the Idaho Realtors layout, when they create it on their forms, they put them on there. That's why I do the same thing. But I would say if you didn't have the date on there, the date is still there. So it just depends on how you want to fill it out. Again, Authentisign, the more you use it and play with it, the easier it gets. There's no limit to how many signings you can have. So you can set up as many fake signings as you want and do them yourselves. If setting up fake signings for yourself isn't what you want to do, then have someone in your office or someone else, maybe your spouse, and work with and send them fake signings and have them sign them for you. Now, at no time today did we talk about sending this to the listing agent specifically, because these are fake signings. Hopefully none of you sent this to the listing agent, because we're not really making an offer on their property. But because that's important, the reason I mentioned that is they don't know we made an offer. I mean, they didn't get some little buzzer going off in Paragon telling them 15 people just made offers on your home. They have no idea. So you can do as many fake transactions as you want. And the reason that's important is the more you do it, the easier it gets. I mean, if you were going to have surgery, I don't think you want the surgeon sitting there with the manual next to him saying, step 3, cut down the thorax. You want them to know what they're doing, because they've already done it a million times. That's how your clients are. The more you do this, the easier it gets. And with Authentisign, it totally makes sense for people that are far away. Authentisign, for sure, you would do that. But it also makes sense for people that are here, because a lot of people have a lot of things going on in their lives. If they're a family, the kids have swimming lessons, scout camp, and we're going to family reunions. We have all these things we're doing. They may not have time to meet with you. So if you have Authentisign as a tool in your toolbox that you're confident with, you can offer that as an option, even if they're here in town. Hey, you can't meet with me? That's great. Let me send it to you electronically. Sign it tonight when you're home, and we'll just talk about it tomorrow. You've just told them that their time matters more to you than your time does. And if you think, well, my people aren't going to want to do Authentisign, I'll give you 2 examples of where people outside of real estate are pulled into electronic signing. First one, go to Dutch Bros on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and you will see all the blue-haired grandmas taking their grandkids to get smoothies. And it's not Authentisign, but they are electronically signing on that kid's iPad. That is electronic signing. It is not that far off from this. Second thing, My wife and I had to change the date of our car payment, and I won't tell you who our loan's with, but they're the biggest credit union in Idaho. If you like the color green, you would like them. The reason I mention who they are is they got branches everywhere. So when I called and talked to a person about changing the payment date, I didn't get, well, go to one of our 20 branches in the valley and stand there and waste your lunch hour and sign a form. What? First thing the guy said is, hey, can I send it to you electronically and you can just sign it right now? He didn't say, are you a millennial? Are you young? Do you know how to do electronic signing? He just offered it right to me. And then I said, oh yeah, that's not a problem. He goes, have you done electronic signing before? I said, I have. And I actually help realtors learn how to use it as well. It's like, oh, that'll be easy. But the fact that he offered that to me first means that he does that to everyone, which means people are used to getting those options. And so if you're using them, then it's going to be the same thing. And I'm not going to pick on any age group or generation of people, but there are certain people that if you're not doing this, they're going to wonder why you're not doing it. And I've had people of all ages say that, you know, when they did a transaction with their agent before they came in agent, they couldn't believe that they didn't use electronic signing. And, you know, people expect this to happen. And the more people, the fallacies that exist with this, the problems with it, like, how do you know who's signing that? Well, how do you know who's signing a fax? In 1987, who do you know who's signing that fax? You didn't know. That's why when you close on a house, you have to have government-issued ID, and you have to have verification at the title company. That's why you just can't close on your house down at the gas station. You have to go to specific places to do it, specific people with specific requirements. So I don't want to say lack of security, but the same errors in security with faxes obviously exist with electronic signing. Like the email, if there's more than one person that can get to that email, of course, other people can sign it. I've had someone say, well, the husband and the wife signed it for both of them. I know she did. Okay, is that a problem? Would the husband have agreed to it? Are they both going to show up for closing and agree? It's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that faxes are the same. So you just have, and the one thing I'll say before I forget with this, and I'll bring up the email I got back, is you'll notice there's a link here that says to download a copy of the certificate of validation and completion. Some lenders, and if I remember right, HUD was one that somebody mentioned, they have to have that certificate when you have electronic signing. With wet signatures, they don't need it. But it's right here, so you can just download it and you have a copy of it. So, and you also can get it from Instanet. Questions, comments, concerns about signing? So you've got the handouts that go over how to do the signing, how to do the transaction. The last part is the signing. It even has screenshots of what your client sees. So you can go back and do this entire process we just did and practice it again. And the transaction template handout, if you want to create more templates, you can go in and do that. If you have a broker that, if you want to, show that to you. If your broker doesn't know about them, show your broker. They could create templates for the whole office to use. So the last thing is there's an evaluation the Real Estate Commission has us give out. There's 2 credits for this morning. This afternoon is when that information will be submitted to the commission and you'll get a certificate in your email. If you want to get rid of signings, since this is a question people always ask too. So here I am back in Instanet. 2 things. If you want to get rid of a signing, you can go here just to Instanet, and then you select the signing you want to get rid of, click on the shopping basket, and there's delete. If you want to get rid of a transaction, it's a very similar process. You choose the transaction you want to get rid of, click on the shopping basket, click the trash can to delete it. Now, you don't have to delete them. There's no limit to how many you can have, but sometimes people like to keep it neat and tidy, and they want to have the things they want to have there, so you can delete them if you want to. The thing to remember is if you do end up deleting something, there isn't a way to bring it back. So deleted is deleted permanently. So that's all I've got for you this morning. If you guys run into any other questions, feel free to give us a call. Down on the bottom of Instanet, this little blue circle is help. And if you go to the question mark, that's their help information. They have 24/7 phone support. They have email support. They have online training like webinars. They also have help videos. The help videos are great because the way they're set up, there's like a million of them, but they're really short. So for example, we just got done doing Instanet, so here's Instanet. And let's say you sent off a signing and you need to change it and send it to another email. So here's a video, edit our participant's email when signing is in progress. So I click there, and it's a little minute and 45-second video about how to go in and change their email address and resend it to the new address. So there's lots of videos, but it's because they're really short videos. So, and if you want to watch a long one, you can also go here to pre-recorded webinars, and they have like hour-long videos of going through the whole process. But they have a lot of help available. And the reason I mention it is if you're doing a signing or you're setting this up and it's on the weekend or evenings, we're not here and we can't walk through it with you. The help is great, but the help is really more there for I'm having a problem, not how do I do something. And so that's why those training videos are really useful. So that's all I've got for you guys this morning. Thanks for coming. You can fill the evaluations out, just leave them at your desks, and they'll get collected. And then, like I said, this afternoon, you'll get sent those emails. Thanks for coming, you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Did the instructor promote additional products?
Right. So, am I trying to sell you a book?
No.
Or subscription?
I was just saying,
Yeah,
that was a weird question.
It's because they use the same evaluation form for like the core class and the post-license class that the real estate commission has to take.
Oh, no, I thought it was, I'm licensed in 2 other states and I use DocuSign and I do other ones. I thought this was really easy.
Yeah, I think it works
I
pretty
mean,
well.
I use DocuSign forever, but
Well, and you can use DocuSign with this. You just have to get the documents out of Instanet.
but this is so easy to do.
Right. I do so too. Yeah.
Yeah. it's-
Yep.
Really enjoyed the class.
Well, good. I'm sorry you couldn't get into it, but tomorrow you'll be able to get into it.
Yeah, I kept looking to see if it would pop through.
Yeah, the thing.
I understand, because I've done, in other states, a lot of the other ones,
Uh-huh.
it was pretty self.
Yeah.
So,
There's not another class